Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I'm Greg. It's Valentine's Day, so I figured this would be a good time to talk about some great love stories in books. And I've already talked about a couple of love stories that I really like, so I'm not going to cover those. I'm going to try to stay away from some of the more obvious ones. And the first one I want to talk about is by E.M. Forster. I've already talked about Maurice, which is his novel about a gay love story. And I really love it. It is one of my favorite books of all time. I talked about it in that video. If you'd like to check it out there, I'll put a link up. Instead, I'm going to talk about E.M. Forster's book, A Room with a View. The premise of this book is fairly familiar. It almost seems like a cliche, but it's done so well that you really don't mind. So it's about Lucy Honeychurch, who has been living a very rigid and proper life in Edwardian England. And in the first half of the book, she travels to Florence, Italy. And while she's there, she discovers this really passionate world of adventure, and it upends all of her beliefs about the world. And she finds herself torn for the rest of the book between that life of passion and love and between what is considered proper. And that push and pull are represented by two different romantic interests. There's George Emerson, whom she meets while she's in Italy. He is a very unconventional man. He seems very odd at first. And he's odd because he lives his life completely dictated by his passions. And they share a kiss in a field. It is actually a very romantic moment in both the book and in the movie. I saw the movie first, and I didn't know if that moment was going to hold up without that cinematic feeling behind it, and it really does. And the other man is named Cecil Weiss, and that last name is not a mistake. He is a very proper, very rigid, and very dull Englishman, and Lucy becomes engaged to him. And that's not a spoiler, it happens in about the middle of the book. And that engagement really furthers the push and pull between these two worlds. The question of who Lucy will ultimately choose is especially resonant because Forster imbues this novel with a shimmering passion and urgency. This isn't a mere love triangle, it feels more like a battle for Lucy's soul. It's not just a love story, it's a question of how a person should live and what society should be at the end of the day. The film adaptation for this is wonderful as well. You cannot go wrong with either one. I love E.M. Forster, and this is a very good book. Check it out. Now we have a sort of unconventional love story. It's a National Book Award winner called Waiting by Ha Jin. Now, like I said, this is kind of an unconventional love story, but it's a very deeply moving one. I found it very profound. It follows the story of Lin Kong, who lives in contemporary China, and he falls in love with a very modern woman named Mana Wu. The problem is, his very traditional family back in his home village has already selected a wife for him, and he gets forced into a marriage with this very traditional woman. And as the years go by, he wants to be with Mana Wu, so he goes to his traditional wife every year and asks her for a divorce, and every year she says no. So he has to keep putting his love for Mana Wu on hold, and both of them have to keep waiting to get what they want. This is a fascinating love story because it goes so much further beyond the idea of just love. It's about a country in a state of transition caught between the modern world and the traditions of its own past. And it asks some very profound questions about the nature of love. Chief among these are, what are the costs of putting your love on hold? Like, there's no easy solution to this situation that Lin Kong finds himself in. What compromises do you have to make in order when you put love on hold, and what happens when you finally get what you want? It's a very intelligent, very heartfelt book. I recommend it very much. It is Waiting by Ha Jin. Now let's go to The Price of Salt, which was adapted into the movie Carol. This is written by Patricia Highsmith, and she uses all of her skills for writing psychological thrillers to do a really unconventional love story. It's essentially a takedown of the classic romance novel tropes. All the more so because the central figures in this novel are women, and it is set in a time when, it was written in a time when such a love story was completely forbidden. So Therese Belivet and Carol Aird meet in the department store where Therese works. Therese is a young woman, and she has been very unhappy with the world. She feels like there are a lot of expectations for what her life should be and how her life should go, and she doesn't feel like they speak to her, so she doesn't really know what to do. She's kind of caught in this transitional point. So when she meets Carol, she latches onto her and is willing to give everything up. Carol is in a much more complicated point in her life. She has been married, she has a daughter, and she's in the middle of a divorce, which was also a forbidden thing back then. And her soon-to-be ex-husband is being really ruthless about the divorce. He has an investigator following Carol around. He's trying to make sure that Carol will not have custody. Not only will she not have custody, she will not be able to see her daughter. Therese and Carol frequently feel a bit bitter. They kind of argue with each other at times, but it feels like they really earn those emotions because they live in a time where they have found love and exactly what they want out of life. But society is doing everything it can to take that away from them and to deny them what they want and to deny them love. And it's such an important story to remember now, because we need to remember that this is how a lot of people lived, and this is how a lot of people still live in the world. The Price of Salt is also unique because it portrays love not just as something that is sublime, but as something that can be difficult. You know, managing a relationship with somebody isn't easy. Carol and Therese can be reproachful of each other, they can be bitter, but you never doubt that they actually love each other underneath all of that. It's just that they're trying to figure things out. It is a remarkable story of gay love in a time when it was forbidden and could ruin lives. And like I said, that's an important thing for us to remember. It's beautifully done, very well told. The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. Now let's talk about a YA novel called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Elire Sainz. I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. So Aristotle and Dante are teenagers. They don't seem like the type of people who would be friends. Aristotle is very angry, he has a brother who's in prison, and Dante is an intellectual. But they meet at a pool and they become friends, they spend some time together, and their friendship really profoundly changes their lives in ways that neither one of them expect. It's a friendship that allows them to examine who they are becoming, and who they have the potential to be. It is a wonderful coming-of-age story, and it's a wonderful love story as well. I don't know that any other novel has captured the struggle to accept your own identity as well as this book has. It's remarkable. I believe I actually cried when I read this, and there are not a lot of books that make me cry. I think I've talked about a couple of them, so it's easy to think I'm not being honest about that, but it is true, and this book managed it. It's just a really, really heartfelt YA novel. I recommend it. And finally, let's talk about last year's Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction, Less by Andrew Sean Greer. This is a thoroughly charming, very witty, modern love story about Arthur Less, a gay man and an author who has achieved middling success as a writer and as a person. Basically, he's coasted through his life. He has been able to get by because he's attractive enough, talented enough, funny enough. And that's just helped him get by. But now he finds himself middle-aged and alone and questioning how he has lived his life. Or rather, he finds himself completely running away from all of those questions because he can't really deal with them. And all of this is prompted by a wedding invitation. He's had this on-again, off-again sort of boyfriend, not really, because he won't commit to anything more. There are a lot of puns in this book. In this case, you could say that Less didn't want more. Anyway, Arthur Less does not want to attend the wedding. He's desperate not to attend the wedding. So he goes through a bunch of invitations for events, speaking engagements, birthday parties that will take him overseas into different areas, and he accepts every single one of them. Anything to ensure that he will not be in town to go to the wedding. He's just looking for an excuse. But of course, he cannot keep away from Reckoning forever. This is a short but engaging and really heartfelt novel, again about modern gay life. And it's a much more deep and profound story about how sometimes you think you want everything, but in the end, less is everything you wanted, and sometimes more. I really recommend this book. It's funny, it's entertaining, it's, like I said, it's short so you can get through it very quickly. It's very clever. I enjoyed it. And of course, if none of these books speak to you, there are others. I mentioned Maurice. I've also talked about Call Me By Your Name on this channel. You can definitely check that one out. There's Pride and Prejudice or Persuasion. You can't go wrong with the classics. Check all of those books out. Do you have any favorite romance novels? Please let me know. Do you disagree with me about any of these? I'd love to hear that. Drop me a comment. Let me know. And again, as always, thank you for watching this video and taking the time out of your day. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing or checking out some of my other content, and I will be back again. Until then, happy reading.